Assalamu alaikum, family. You're tuned into the Sajdah channel, and my name is Sajdah Wendy Muhammad. And we're going to talk today about the concept of separation. And what I hope to accomplish today is that we open up to the idea, understand it a little bit more, and realize that we have some case studies and some excerpts from history that will serve as guides for our strategic planning as we begin to move from theory or from the theory of separation into the tactical and strategic realm of separation. So be a friend, tell a friend, grab your coffee or tea, and we'll be right back.
O Allah, guide me among those whom Thou hast guided aright, and preserve me among those whom Thou hast preserved, and befriend me among those whom Thou hast befriended. Bless me in whatsoever Thou dost grant me, and deliver me from the evil of what Thou hast judged. Surely Thou judgest, and none can judge against Thee, and he whom Thou befriendest is not disgraced. Blessed art Thou, O Lord, and exalted be Thee above what they set up besides Thee. I bear witness, nothing deserves to be served besides Thee, and I bear witness that Muhammad is Thy servant and apostle. Amen.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who in my judgment is the master historian, taught us that of all our studies, history is the most attractive, and it is best qualified to reward the researcher. History is most attractive. Why should history be most attractive? Because history is the recorded time of the human family in its struggle to overcome obstacles. There is no life that is without struggle. The Holy Quran teaches us that man, meaning man and woman, is made to face difficulties. And after difficulty comes ease. But it is history that guides us through difficulty. For if you know how people who had difficulty yesterday got through, and if your difficulty is somewhat similar, then today we also can get through if we follow the guidance of history. This is why Carter G. Woodson and many of our black giants fought for black people to know our history. Because in not knowing our history, we don't have a guide. And without a guide, we are lost. No wonder the Bible...
Assalamu alaikum, family. Peace be unto you. Yes, we are in week 3 of our Money Psychology webinar series. And this week we are covering financial literacy. And we're trying to break down some of those barriers that many of us have when it comes to our relationship with money, when it comes to our relationship with ourselves, right? And how oftentimes we feel so unworthy of money, and how oftentimes we keep our spirituality separate from our quest for money, and we keep our mission separate from our quest for money. So we're going to, we're just dealing with that. It's been 3 powerful weeks. 2 powerful weeks so far. This is going to be the 3rd one. Our special guest this week is Sister Alita Muhammad. She's going to be on Sunday at 7 p.m. Use this QR code if you just want to attend this session. And then we're going to follow up next week with the money mindset. So it has been so worth it. So worth it. And the feedback that I have been getting is really amazing. And what Allah has been doing in blessing us with these events that we've been having, both at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad House and these money psychology and business relationship events, is he has upped the elevation experience. He has elevated the experience, I should say. Yeah, it's an elevated experience too, but he has elevated the experience. The last event that we had at the house, the Black Opera, was on another level. And we've been challenged to think about, topping that. I should make an announcement to you all. June 26th, we are not having the Black Waltz. We decided we've got some logistical challenges that we have to work through. So we're postponing it, and we'll let you know what that date is going to be. But on the 26th, we still got some good stuff we're going to do. I'm thinking we're going to do a networking mixer for our Black businesses in the community, those who are conscious, who want to start coming together, doing business on another level. And during that time, we may very well debut the first episode of our series called The Messenger's Residence. And I think you all are enjoying it. So we're going to swap out events. We'll let you know when the waltz is going to be. We want the waltz to be just as elevated as the opera. And so we're working on curating something that's going to give you that level of experience. But if you planned on coming out, then come on out to the business mixer. You'll get a flyer. We're going to put a flyer out about that soon here. But yeah, come on out. Let's do it. And then more so, come over Sunday to the Sajdah channel. You can do it right from your home, right from your bedroom, right from the bed. I want you to be sitting up and be active, but do it how you want to do it. Okay. Today, let me grab my notes here. We're going to talk about separation. And what's interesting about separation is that for many of us, this is a loaded topic because a lot of us just don't see how we're going to do it. Sometimes you hear people say, well, we're going to be forced to do it. There's going to be some catastrophic event that's going to force us to do it, which may very well be the case. Some of us are saying, well, the current administration and the way that they are tanking the economy, the American economy, is what's going to force us to do it. But I think we need to be focusing on being diligent about it. And we got to move off of theory so that we're not just constantly talking about it and going deeper into it. We got to move from theory into the tactical and strategic side of it. And so we've got some examples from history, as well as some current spaces that we can utilize as templates that will help us with that strategy. And so I pose the question, is separation a new concept? And who do we need to develop into in order to successfully separate? Have we ever separated? And in light of our discussion on separation, again, I got to encourage you to tune in Sunday for our third Money Psychology webinar series. This week's special guest, as I mentioned, is the financial architect, Sajdah Muhammad. And we're going to discuss financial literacy. So use the QR code in the corner here and join the powerful discussion. If you missed the past 2 weeks, you missed some powerful information. I'm going to bring that back, but it's coming back pay-per-view. So you got to actually, this stuff, you got to pay for. That's how transformational it is. It's only $25. Some of us blow that on a Starbucks coffee and a couple times a day and a Danish. So we got it. But listen, you just don't want to miss it. So I strongly suggest, because what you want to do is start getting your mind into this new way of thinking about business and money. Okay. So with the concept of separation, we're going to begin with the Muslim program given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Point number 4 of what the Muslims want. It's always on either the back, if you have older Muhammad Speaks or older financial Final Call newspaper, or it's on that inside back cover. Okay. And I'm going to read point number 4 to us, just so we kind of understand where this comes from. Okay. So the Muslim program that we are working to put before Congress says this: we want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of their own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to provide such land and that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says to us, can't let them off the hook when it comes to separation. Okay. In an even much more talked about interview, The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan appeared on April 13th, 1997 on NBC Television's Meet the Press. He was interviewed by Tim Russert and David Broder, or Broader, I think that's probably how you say it. The subject of separation came up, and here is some of the dialogue. So listen to this dialogue. So Mr. Roeder said, in preparing for this interview, I read the literature that your organization puts out and publishes, and I'd like to go through it to find out what you believe and how it affects America. This is your newspaper, The Final Call. Mine's way over there. He held up the Final Call newspaper, which comes out once a month, and on the back page, and then the minister interjects and says once a week, because the paper comes out once a week. And he says, okay, once a week. On the back page is the Muslim program, what the Muslims want. And if I can go through a few of these, let me put one on the screen and get your reaction. So he puts one on the screen. And the one he puts on the screen, the first is in terms of territory, you'll see. And he said, and it says, since we cannot get along with them in peace and equality, we believe our contribution to this land and the suffering forced upon us by white America justifies our demand for complete separation in a state or territory of our own. Is that your view in 1997? A separate state for Black Americans? So the minister replies, you can just see his face. He says, first, and I want you all to listen to this. First, the program starts with number one. He's referring to the Muslim program. That, referring to what he just showed him, is number four. The first part of that program is that we want freedom, a full and complete freedom. The second is we want justice. We want equal justice under the law, and we want justice applied equally to all, regardless of race or class or color. And the third point of the Muslim program is that we want equality. We want equal membership in society with the best of civilized society. We're not saying, now Elijah Muhammad wasn't saying, nor was the minister saying in this interview, we just want to be equal. We want to be equal in society with the best in your civilized society. If we can get that within the political, economic, social system of America, there's no need for point number four, which is the point I read at the beginning. But if we cannot get along in peace after giving America 400 plus now years of service and sweat and labor, then of course, separation would be the solution to our problem. Did y'all hear that? So there's some process in the minister's answer to the question. Okay, I'm going to read it again without commentary. The minister's response said, first, the program starts with number one. That is number four. The first part of that program is that we want freedom, a full and complete freedom. The second is we want justice. We want equal justice under the law, and we want justice applied to equally to all, regardless of race or color or class. And the third is that we want equality. We want equal membership in society with the best in civilized society. If we can get that within the political, economic, and social system of America, then there's no need for point number four. But if we cannot get along in peace with you after giving America 400 years of our service and sweat and labor, then of course separation would be the solution to our problem. Now, this concept of separation bothers a lot of people. And the minister's answers makes separation go down a little bit smoother, right? So for those of us that still hope that we can get those things within the context of the American system, can find a little glimmer of hope in the minister's answer. Some of us view this concept as an extreme overreach, and many are downright afraid to even think of this subject. I want to ease us into the concept because this concept of separation was performed numerous times during Reconstruction, except absent a protective military. Had many of those towns sustained, we would be having a different conversation today. So those towns, those over 1,200 Black settlements that were put together during Reconstruction, many did not have, or most didn't have, the knowledge and the know-how how to protect themselves from the warfare that was unleashed against those towns, whether it was economic warfare with poisoning of the water, whether it was agricultural warfare with poisoning the crops and the land, or whether it was just actual physical warfare or terrorism where they just rode through the towns and burned them up. How do we avoid the repeat of history that led to the destruction of our towns? What happened and what were the signs? If we're going to separate, we must transition into tactical strategy that we can begin to deploy within our existing communities. Almost like we have an opportunity to practice separation in the spaces where we are already separated. And as we discuss here on this program all the time, and many of you have heard my stories of my experiences in Liberia, separate territory established in Africa for freed American slaves, you understand that if we don't get our behaviors and morals in check, first, we can recreate what we've seen in similar territories. We have the benefit of history and many case studies that can help us to put this process together. So in other words, some of this predatory behavior that a lot of us practice because we've seen other people do it, you can't come to the new Black community or the new territories with that madness. Let me read to you from a report published by PolicyLink entitled Repairing Roots, Historic Black Towns and Spatial Reclamation. All right. This is very, very interesting stuff. More than 1,200 historically Black towns were founded during the years of Reconstruction and at the end of the 19th century, continuing into the early 20th century. But several were established long before the Civil War. I bet y'all didn't know it was 1,200, did you? All you thought about was Black Wall Street because that's the most popular one. But there were actually 50 Black settlements or Black towns in the state of Oklahoma alone. Right? So historic Black towns, both incorporated and unincorporated, can be understood as what they call settlements that are predominantly inhabited and governed by Black people and were established to create safe and autonomous communities amidst widespread racial discrimination and violence. From coast to coast, in each pocket of the United States, Black entrepreneurs, farmers, and professionals broke ground in new locations throughout Florida. There was one in California, which if we have time, I'm going to show you a video called Allentown. It was Allentown, California, which was a Black governed town. Oklahoma, like I mentioned, there were 50 Black towns in this state alone. Texas and beyond. Black families and individuals thrived economically and politically without the violent oversight and control of white supremacist culture and policies. The dramatic loss of Black towns and settlements was far from accidental. A host of systemic challenges and mechanisms of dispossession have enabled the erasure of these spaces. All right. Now, I want to begin to think about how to prevent these tactics and others so that we won't lay out we won't end up repeating these mistakes. And I can't, if when I was doing some researches, I started to see, because I can't help but think that with 1,200 towns, you had different philosophical views. Some have been along religious lines. Some towns, while they were established and set up by Black people, other people from other cultures lived there also. But it began to be about the morality, the mindset, the mission under which many of these towns were created. And let me say this to us as conscious entrepreneurs, because a lot of us think that, look, my credentials are going to get me there. I can just stand up in front of an audience and I can be strictly tactical and all of this. But see, if you don't figure out how to tie a mission to what you're doing, then your concept of entrepreneurship as a conscious entrepreneur can be snuffed out very easily. Because there's always going to be somebody that's better than you. There's always going to be somebody that's got more experience than you. There's always going to be somebody that has better relationships or knows more people. And especially if you're Black in America and we don't have a cohesive community the way many other cultures have, then standing yourself up there going, hey, here's my credentials and here's who I am, and judge me by that is really naive. You have to. Every company now, every company I work with has a mission statement, and they have a mission that they are tying their policies, procedures, and their goals to. And you too, as an individual, must be mission driven as a professional. See, when you're mission driven, mission is going to help you go further and longer. It's going to expand your wings, and it's going to help you when some of those attacks come. But let's talk about some of the things that they used against these settlers and pioneers in these Black towns. As I mentioned, they used tactics of direct violence. Okay. Though often viewed as a tactic of the past, state-sanctioned mob violence strategically employed to suppress Black progress and autonomy in service of white supremacy has left enduring generational impacts. This violence was often coordinated with the explicit state approval or tacit allowance and sought to dismantle Black autonomy, economic growth, and community stability. And this one right here is what's got a lot of people scared. One could say rightfully so, or we could say, all right, how do we strategically plan and set up militarily, if you will, so that we can respond or prevent these tactics of direct violence? Again, I'm calling all of this stuff a template or case studies that we can use. So we're not just going to go pitch a tent somewhere. Okay. Many of us live in neighborhoods or communities or even small towns where these type of principles that I'm going to be talking about these next 2 days can be deployed into your local government, whether it's a local community government or if you're establishing a town. But there are processes that we can begin to deploy in these communities now. There's so many abandoned cities. And so once we go in and understand what are some of the perils of the city, what are the challenges, and I know that a lot of people think that the only time white people leave a town or city is if it's something wrong, but sometimes they age out. If the industry leaves and the population gets older and it just ages out, and so you get these abandoned towns. And in a lot of cases, it's not that and don't get me wrong, yes, there are cases where you got these companies, especially before all of this regulation came into play, that were dumping toxic chemicals into the water, into the land. But now we got technology. We can test for this type of thing. All right, let me just keep going. Okay, so we talked about that first tactic they use, direct violence. State sanctioned, oftentimes, direct violence. The states more than likely had to sanction it, which is why many of these towns were literally just wiped out. And I'd never even heard of them. I grew up in Nebraska. One, I didn't know that Malcolm X lived not far from my grandmother's house near where we were raised. But I also did not know about Bliss, Nebraska, or DeWitt, Nebraska, that were Black settlement towns. Here's the second one, racist planning regimes. So municipal boundary and zoning law manipulations, okay, like extraterrestrial jurisdictions, long impeded Black communities from accessing resources, economic and educational opportunities, essential services, and political representation. So the city planning departments or the state planning departments purposely being racist and creating jurisdictional restrictions that pinched or cut off or even stopped their access to many resources that were economic, to educational opportunities, essential services, political representation. So if you are in a Black town right now, work to make sure that your essential services work properly. If somebody calls 911, who responds? Is there a budget for response? Is there an ambulance service? Is there a hospital? What's your political representation like? You know, we see this so much now over here in Illinois, where we have these smaller suburban towns and the leadership gets so corrupt and things are so crazy, and that's all you hear about it. That's a time where we can begin to practice proper civic responsibility. The next way that they would do things is forced sales and land loss. Almost everybody got somebody in their family that had property down south that got stolen or taken away. I don't even think I know a Black person that hasn't experienced that. So our current property tax and legal system exploits the ambiguity of Black land titles by allowing legal proceedings such as heirs, property, and partition sales to involuntarily strip Black property owners of their land. This is so widespread in our families. This also has created an epigenetic pattern where we're scared. We think we can't have nothing because we remember when grandma and them used to have that land that was taken from them. I remember that show that Tyler Perry did called Queen Sugar, where they were fighting down in Louisiana to keep the land. And there was just one thing after another. So again, when we talked about our prayers in webinar week 1, we did a special prayer to decode our DNA, our epigenetics, and our mind from the trauma that occurred that continues to be passed down to us from the forced sale and land loss that our grandparents and great-grandparents experienced. Okay. Then there's property tax assessments. So rampant tax assessment disparities for Black households have led to a significant overvaluation of properties or an imposition of the Black tax in gentrifying communities, causing families to pay higher tax bills and experience increased financial strain or even land loss and displacement. Okay, those two kind of go hand in hand. Then I talked about there's the environmental stuff, and that's where regulatory neglect and the exclusion of Black towns from land use decision-making processes have severely undermined their ability to protect themselves from environmental injustices and climate change-induced natural disasters. The lack of agency leaves these communities disproportionately vulnerable to harmful environmental impacts. You see, you've got many Black towns throughout the South, or towns that were once predominantly Black, where maybe an oil company or some type of chemical company dumps something into the land or into the water. So again, when we become mayors of these smaller towns, these suburban towns, you got to stop playing around and trying to get extra money, arguing, fussing, and fighting. Meanwhile, people are suffering in these towns because the water's being poisoned. Look at Flint. The land is being poisoned while we over here playing around, fussing and fighting over a couple extra dollars and trying to make this our fiefdom. We asleep at the wheel, and we don't even see that these environmental injustices is an act of terrorism and warfare against the town where many of our people live. And usually by the time we get to be the mayor of the little town, they've already planned out these types of attacks. So again, let's stop being asleep at the wheel. If you're running for mayor, you're running for office, if you're over one of these small towns, stop playing games and sit down and study some of these ways in which we can make sure that these predominantly Black-owned towns aren't continued to be attacked. Because we get distracted. We over here fighting and trying to figure out how many cars we can buy, how many government contracts we can get, who gonna pay us under the table for a contract, spending extra money, going out on yachts, kicking it, trying to figure out how many extra Gucci bags and Louis Vuitton bags we can buy, how we want to look a certain way and be a certain way while we in office. Meanwhile, there's a whole strategy being plotted against you, and you don't see it because you're busy chasing trinkets, being a consumer. Okay. Now, we hear a lot about Black Wall Street, and we certainly can't cover all 1,200 towns. All right. I think you guys know that, right? But I will say once again that we have the benefit of history and case studies that will help to aid us with our strategy of separation. I want to show you a video about Allentown. Allentown was the first and only all-Black town in the state of California. Okay. And let me see if I can pull this up here. And I think we got some time. We can watch the whole thing. It's about 10 minutes. Here we go. But I think it's worth us checking out in light of this conversation. Okay. So again, I want you to start thinking about this. When you start thinking about the principles that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad laid out for separation. And yes, the ultimate ask is a state or territory of our own with the money to go along with it, with the reparations and all that to go along with it. But right now, many of us are in a position where we are either living in predominantly Black towns, or we're even becoming mayors and city officials in Black towns. We have to start thinking more holistically. It's not just about that contract. It's not just about how you look in office. We got to look at this holistically and think about the many different ways that we have been shown historically. This is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said history is best at rewarding its student. We have been shown historically the methods of terrorism that would be deployed against many of these Black-owned towns. And the water and the lack of access to emergency services are ones that we see all the time. So we got to get in there and figure out, how do you run a water plant? How do you keep the water safe and clean? How do you make sure that companies aren't dumping toxic waste in our land? How often do you test it? There are enough of us that work at these places that we can figure it out. It's just that when we get in leadership, whether it's a little town like, well, I won't name any town, but y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm just thinking about just the small suburban towns in suburban Detroit and suburban Chicago. All right. Then let's get in there and start figuring out how to really run a municipality and get up off of thinking that this is our time to shine and look like, anyway, let me get off my soapbox. All right. So I want you to check out this video. Okay. And there are countless videos like this on YouTube. Let me say this one last thing. If you start programming your algorithms on social media, then when you pull up YouTube, when you pull up your social media, you're not going to get all the boots on the ground stuff. You're going to get educational stuff like this. I call YouTube University, and my algorithms are programmed such that I get lots of spiritual stuff and metaphysical stuff. I get historical stuff about the Nation of Islam. I get historical stuff like this about Black towns. That's what pops up in my feed, in my algorithm on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and even on TikTok. On TikTok, I like animals and plants, so I do get a lot of horse farms and stuff like that. But you can train your algorithm so that you're not just mindlessly scrolling through all the pop culture programming that is messing your brain up and making you feel insecure. All right. So check this video out and give me a thumbs up in the chat.
Time in history when Blacks were being lynched on a weekly basis, and the U.S. Supreme Court essentially legalized racism in the form of Jim Crow segregation, Blacks headed west in a desperate quest to achieve an idealized notion of American freedom. Dusty frontier towns were transitioning from being Mexican territories to part of the new Union state of California by September of 1850. California joined the Union as a free state, and this attracted Blacks who were navigating life post-slavery. One of those Blacks, an escaped slave who became the highest-ranking Black officer in the Union Army, was Colonel Allen Allensworth. He led 4 other Black men in founding the first and only town in California that was fully funded, designed, built, governed, and populated exclusively by Black people. Let's dive into that history. Allensworth, the only California town founded and financed by Blacks. Written and narrated by Daniel J. Middleton. While life at the turn of the century was hard for Blacks due to forces outside their community, disparity also existed within. This was highlighted most prominently in the ongoing debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, 2 great leaders of that period. While both men strongly advocated for Black social and economic progress, they made a public show of their sharp disagreement on the process by which these measures were to be accomplished. Directly in the midst of this civil rights quandary and heightened racial discrimination, 5 ambitious Black men looked to California for a solution. Leading the way was Colonel Allensworth. On April 7, 1842, Allensworth was born in Louisville, Kentucky, the son of slaves named Phyllis and Levi. He was the youngest of 13 children, all of whom were sold off to various southern plantations. In the 1914 book, The Battles and Victories of Allen Allensworth, the author, Charles Alexander, relying on a primary source, writes, his mother was the slave of Mrs. A.P. Starbird of Louisville, and as soon as Allen was old enough to be of any service, he was given to Mrs. Starbird's son, Thomas, to be his little nigger. as was the prevailing custom among such people at that time. It became apparent quite early that Allensworth was not going to abide a life of slavery. At around the age of 12, he was sold downriver to Mississippi for trying to learn how to read and write by playing school with young Thomas, and twice he attempted unsuccessful escapes. A third attempt, when the Civil War was already raging, resulted in Allensworth finding freedom at last. The war seemed to beckon Allensworth, who offered his service to the 44th Illinois Volunteer Infantry as a civilian nursing aide. But the post did not satisfy his desire to help the war effort. To that end, he joined the Union Navy on April 3, 1863, becoming a first-class seaman at a salary of $18 per month. His pay quickly increased to $30 thereafter, and he served on various gunboats, including the Queen City, the Pittsburgh, and the Cincinnati. Allensworth started out as a clerk and the captain's steward, but rose to the rank of first-class petty officer. After completing his service at the end of the war, he was honorably discharged on April 4, 1865, 11 days prior to the assassination of President Lincoln. Allensworth had the privilege of reuniting with his mother in Louisville briefly following the war. Then he traveled to Mound City, Illinois to secure work. The Mound City Naval Yard hired him as a commissary or clerk to the commandant, and that lasted till 1867, when he decided to pool savings with his brother William and go into business for himself. That resulted in 2 restaurants located in different parts of St. Louis, which met with success from the start. After receiving an attractive offer from a prospective buyer, the brothers sold the establishments and Allensworth left his brother back in St. Louis while he moved on to new pastures. According to Charles Alexander, Allensworth's mother, Phyllis, told him that he was named for Bishop Allen, the respected preacher of the African Methodist Episcopal AME Church, whom she hoped her son would one day emulate. Allensworth must have taken this to heart because after experiencing a religious conversion, he became a minister during Reconstruction. Allensworth accomplished this by enrolling at the Baptist Theological Institute, now Roger Williams University, in Nashville, Tennessee, where he studied theology. And it was there that he met and married Josephine Lavelle, an accomplished organist and music teacher. Allensworth settled down to a quiet life in his native Louisville, where he preached from several pulpits. His mother, Phyllis, lived with them for a few months until she passed away in 1878 at age 96. But joy filled the home once more when the couple had 2 children together, named Eva and Nella. The success of Allensworth's ministry also led to a political calling, and he served as a Kentucky delegate to the Republican National Convention in 1880 and 1884, being the first and only Black delegate in Chicago both years. Back in his day, the Republican Party was synonymous with Abraham Lincoln and civil rights, and therefore attracted a considerable amount of Blacks. While life in Louisville was good, Allensworth was not allowed to rest on his laurels. In his book, Notable Southern Californians in Black History, author Robert Lee Johnson writes, "In 1882, the United States military had 2 cavalry units and 2 infantry units that were segregated. One of the complaints was that there were not any Black chaplains. A Black soldier approached Reverend Allensworth to discuss the issue. Allensworth learned that the chaplain of the 24th Infantry, which was one of the Buffalo Soldier regiments, was planning to retire in 4 years. This caused him to spring into action. Allensworth embarked on a tireless campaign to win the support of Southern Democrats and Republicans in office, and then he sent letters to the office of the Adjutant General, a chief army official, and President Grover Cleveland himself, laying out a persuasive argument for his cause. His efforts paid off, because on April 1st, 1886, he was appointed as chaplain of the 24th Infantry by President Cleveland with the rank of captain. He was one of only 2 Black chaplains at the time, but for the next 20 years, Allensworth served faithfully in his new military role while keeping a watchful eye on the men entrusted to his care. Upon retiring in 1906, Allensworth attained the rank of lieutenant colonel, being the first Black man in history to do so. He led his family to Los Angeles, but a quiet retirement was not in the equation for Allensworth. The country was still in the fierce grip of racial discrimination, under which blacks suffered. They were victims of disenfranchisement, segregation, and prevalent lynching. And Los Angeles, despite being part of a free state, was no exception. Allensworth sided with Booker T. Washington in his debate with W.E.B. Du Bois. Washington propagated the idea of blacks being self-sufficient and unified in a collective cause that was beneficial to the culture. While some of his views were controversial, Washington's message also centered on blacks taking up agricultural pursuits as a colony, where they would be free of racial oppression. Other Los Angeles residents sympathized with Washington's view as well, namely teacher and scholar William Payne, Nevada miner John A. Palmer, AME minister William H. Peck, and realtor Harry A. Mitchell. Allensworth joined forces with them, and together, the five gentlemanly-looking Negro men, as the Delano holograph labeled them on June 13, 1908, set out to create an all-black community in California. Back then, whites who followed the logic of British scientist Francis Galton, creator of the field of eugenics, a Greek word meaning well-born, believed that blacks were genetically inferior. Allensworth and his four colleagues were bent on countering the biological racism by establishing a town where blacks, particularly soldiers from the nation's four all-black regiments, could enjoy opportunities denied them by systems and communities controlled by whites. In this agricultural colony, each soldier would have a decent home where his family could live safely and in peace while he was off fighting for his country. To make the dream a reality, on June 30th, 1908, Colonel Allensworth and his associates created the California Colony and Home Promoting Association. Allensworth turned to the church community to raise the funds necessary for a land purchase, and while he succeeded in doing this, landowners refused to sell to him. In time, a white-owned Los Angeles land development syndicate known as Pacific Farming Company approached the eager buyer. About 30 miles north of Bakersfield lay 800 acres of fertile land in rural Toledo, California that was up for sale. Not only did the Pacific Farming Company sell the land deed they signed stated that they were to supply the future town with a water system equal to the needs of its residents. On August 3, 1908, the association filed a township site plan with the Tulare County Recorder for Toledo, which had a convenient station that connected Los Angeles and San Francisco on the Santa Fe Railroad. That very year, Toledo was renamed Allensworth in honor of its most celebrated founder. A council form of government was chosen to administer town affairs. It was known as the Allensworth Progressive Association, of which both men and women held various positions of responsibility. Officers were routinely elected by townspeople, and during town meetings, residents were encouraged to participate in civic affairs. The township attracted black families who moved there with enthusiasm. Within a year, Allensworth was home to 35 families. By 1912, the population grew to 100, including the town's first newborn, Alwortha Hall, who was born in 1910 to Allensworth residents William and Elizabeth Hall. In 1914, the town also became a voting precinct and a judicial district, with both a justice of the peace and constable. 2 general stores, a post office, a library, and a school were established to serve the community. The school was the largest investment for the town, costing $5,000 to build, catering to students ranging from elementary to high school grades, and it had 3 board members. One was Allensworth's wife, Josephine, who was its first teacher. An Allensworth business district soon developed, boasting a bakery, a livery stable, a drugstore, a barber shop, a machine shop, several other stores, and even a hotel. But the town truly was an agricultural community, which depended on the cultivation of sugar beets, cotton, alfalfa, and grain. Black farmers also raised chickens, turkeys, dairy cattle, and Belgian hares. These enterprises required a lot of water, and for the first few years, the town flourished, with the population peaking at 300 settlers by the early 1920s. The community started a slow decline following a tragic incident in September 1914. Colonel Allensworth sought to expand his eponymous town further. This involved a lecture circuit that took him to various black churches throughout California, where he spoke passionately to congregants in an effort to raise more funds and attract new residents. While in Monrovia, California, to give one of his usual lectures, the colonel stepped off a streetcar and was immediately struck down by a speeding motorcyclist. The colonel died within 24 hours. The Allensworth community was devastated, but it carried on under the leadership of the Justice of the Peace and co-founder Professor William Payne, but the colonel could not be replaced. By 1920, William Payne, who served as a school principal, was gone. He moved to El Centro for a teaching job. Allensworth's widow, Josephine, moved to Los Angeles the same year to live with her daughter, Nella. After 1925, a mass exodus started when the Pacific Farming Company failed to supply enough irrigation water to meet the needs of Allensworth's farmers, which led to prolonged legal battles. The water problem began in 1914, after a drought caused white farmers to close in on Allensworth and divert water from a community well. What used to be a well-watered area with water from the Sierra Nevada mountains simply bubbling up out of the earth soon suffered a drop in groundwater levels, which forced residents to drill. But the water eventually dried up. Residents were also forced to move away to find work, and property values in Allensworth bottomed out as a result. Even the racist Santa Fe Railroad, which refused to hire blacks from Allensworth to man their own station, soon built a new line to bypass the town altogether. Then, in 1966, state officials learned that the remaining groundwater was contaminated with arsenic. By that time, only 34 families remained in Allensworth, and all seemed lost. But in 1969, former Allensworth resident Cornelius Ed Pope, who was a draftsman and planner for the California Department of Parks and Recreation, launched a campaign to create a state historic site at Allensworth. By 1974, the state purchased the land and formed an advisory committee. And later that year, then Governor Ronald Reagan gave the go-ahead to establish the park. In 1976, plans for the development of the 240-acre park were approved, and on October 6, 1976, the park was officially dedicated. Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park is on the National Registry of Historic Places and is a California historical landmark. Unlike many Black communities of the past, which no longer exist, Allensworth can still be visited and experienced. The official website of the state park leaves us with this picture of Allensworth. Today, a collection of lovingly restored and reconstructed early 20th century buildings, including the Colonel's House, historic schoolhouse, Baptist church, and library, once again dots this flat farm country, giving new life to the dreams of these visionary pioneers. I would love to hear what you think.
I wanted to show that whole thing to us. I know some of us have ADHD and we can't pay attention. I'm sorry for you, but you're going to have to start focusing if we're going to be strategic in rebuilding these wasted cities. Okay. And tomorrow we're going to come back and continue to talk about separation, but we're going to take a look at another Black town, because I want you to start getting this concept in your mind that this has been done before. We can do it, except now that we know the truth and we have supreme wisdom, we have to learn how to take that supreme wisdom and place it in an operational fashion and make it part of our way of life, part of our way of government, so that we're not going into these wasted cities or going into these cities, becoming mayor, becoming city council members, or just sitting there and waiting, like, sitting ducks for somebody to come poison the water or do something. We have to, there's another way of life in which we got to move strategically. Try not to give away everything, but I just want our wheels to start flowing. So don't be so afraid and so turned off when you hear us talking about separation, and don't be so off-putting about thinking that, most Black people say, well, I don't like other Black people and I don't want to live. In a lot of cases, we living around each other anyway. So before we pack up and move to another state, let's start practicing with these right principles of government. Okay. Yes, you're right, Brother Ron. I mean, you talking about some history. You can get lost in this. And some of these Black towns, I mean, the stuff is just beautiful. So we got to start studying this, and we have to start including this in our educational process and in our mission as we move, as business people, as entrepreneurs, because that's who I'm talking to right now. I'm talking to those of us who are entrepreneurs who are going to be bold enough to say, hey, we can run this city. Hey, I'm going to help and support in this particular manner. All right. Okay. So I know we're right at the 7 o'clock hour, so I'm going to get us out of here. Please support the work that we're doing. As I mentioned, we're not having the waltz on the 26th, but we're going to work on having a business mixer and possibly showing the first episode of The Messenger's Residence. That's on June 26th. So stay close and stay tuned. You can support us by going to Cash App, Sajdah Enterprises, or Zelle, wendy100m@gmail.com. We also got to remember, freedom ain't free, and we want access to information. We can't always assume it's going to be free, and we can't leave somebody else always holding the bag to preserve our stuff and give us the information. Okay, so your support is greatly appreciated. And then use this QR code right here to sign up for week 3 of our Money Psychology series, because again, we got some self-improvement to do. We got some work to do. Let's go back through our self-improvement study guides, and then let's work on our relationship with money. And we've been doing that every week, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, right here on the Sajdah channel. But you got to go up here and use this QR code to sign up. Okay. It's going to be, trust me, it's going to be worth the time and worth a couple dollars. So go there, sign up. Sunday's special guest is Sister Alita Muhammad. She's a financial advisor. We're going to be talking about financial instruments and finance in general. But also I'm going to deal with worthiness. And we're going to start that conversation a little bit. So also check out the past few week episodes right here on the Sajdah channel. And again, donate, support. We do this. I do it because I really feel like it's a calling on my life, and need your continued support in order to be able to really respond to that call. All right, family, thank you very much. I'm wishing each and every one of you more goodness, more love, more peace than you've ever experienced or imagined. I'm sorry I did not acknowledge y'all in the chat. Brother Ronald, I see you. I see you, Mom. Servant Nasir, 704 Joe. Sister Alicia says that was so good. Thank you, sis. Are you enjoying the Money Psychology series? I know you've been popping on a few of them. Thank you for your continued support. Sister Alicia is an amazing supporter. She's been a client of mine, and she supports the movement. And so I'm just asking all of us to support, because these platforms and these things that we do, it's not free. Okay. Says stay serious and smile at the same time. Yeah. You know, okay, family. I am going to get us out of here. I promise this time. And we'll see you. I'll show our Money Psychology commercial again. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings. All right. See you all tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Central Time, right here, the Sajdah channel. Remember, it's not personal, it's vibrational.